this past weekend in Moscow, there was a terrorist attack carried out by ISIS-K. ISIS-K is an Afghan branch of ISIS that was created in around 2015, 2016, when its leaders broke away from Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And this weekend, 4 armed men walked into a city concert hall in Moscow where a rock band was playing, and they opened fire on the crowd, killing men, women, and children. And then they lit the building on fire. And now, as it stands at the time of this episode, there are over 130 people killed in that terrorist attack. I think a lot of people are very confused as to why ISIS-K would carry out a terrorist attack in Russia. And it is actually, when I say it's understandable, I don't mean it's an endorsement at all, but I'm saying given the history, it actually isn't such a difficult thing to understand why ISIS-K targeted Moscow. So this goes back to Russia's invasion. I think this goes back to Russia's invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. Americans just totally forget that. I mean, we barely know the history of our own country, let alone, the history of various other countries. But in fact, Russia has a very embittered relationship with many elements of the Islamic world. And it does go back to that invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. Also, in the more recent past, there were problems in Chechnya, which is a part of Russia where many Muslims lived, and the Russian government carried out atrocities against Muslims there. So Russia has been a prime target for groups like ISIS-K for some time. And as I said, ISIS-K is that branch of ISIS which is affiliated with Afghanistan. What's scary to consider is that Russia seems difficult to penetrate. They have such an intense police force. They're very diligent about their security that it really is kind of amazing that this was allowed to happen. And you can't help but wonder what the next target is going to be. And especially with all of our security lapses, namely our open borders, the amount of information that has come out from the FBI, among other sources, saying that there are people entering our country who are on the terrorist watch list. There was someone who entered the country recently who is a member of Hezbollah. You can't help but wonder if we may not be too far behind. We kind of, as a country, have gotten arrogant. We think that we're immune to having another 9/11 event happen to us, but we are not immune. We are certainly not immune. But what's also interesting is that China does not seem right now to be high up on the list of these terrorists' countries to target. And that's worthy of note because, as we know, China is massacring Uighur Muslims. And Uighur Muslims are Turkish mostly, and that's caused some chilly relations between Turkey and China. But even despite China massacring and organ harvesting Uighur Muslims, they don't seem, at least right now, and as compared to Russia and the United States, to be a prime target for these terrorist events. And I wonder why that is. I think it's a few things. I think that obviously China has played it well from their perspective. They, as I say on the show all the time, they don't launch these invasions of countries. They come into countries and they offer help. They go into Iran, for instance, and they give Iran a lot of money. They buy Iran's oil. They build a railway line, among other things, in Tehran. They reindustrialize the Ayatollah Khomeini International Airport. They seem to package themselves as a helping hand to many of these terrorist countries. And that has insulated them. And I think that from China's perspective, it's been very smart of them. If you look at their past 50 to 60 years of geopolitical relations, they have not as compared to the United States and Russia, launched these big scale invasions. Obviously, they've upped the ante with regard to Taiwan. There have certainly been border skirmishes between China and India, for example. But look at the United States. We had the Vietnam War, we had the Korean War, we had the Iraq and Afghanistan War, the Gulf War also in the 90s, with Kuwait. If you look at the Soviet Union and Russia, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The Soviet Union had all of these satellite states, not just, the constituent Soviet socialist republics, but also these satellite states in Eastern Europe. Russia invaded Georgia, it invaded Crimea, and then it invaded Ukraine. And I think that China has kind of looked at the United States and Russia, and they have seen how those invasions have worked out for those respective countries. And it has not worked out fantastically for the United States, and it has not worked out fantastically for Russia. And China has been shrewd enough to pursue another realm of infiltration. Not invasion, but help, aka buy-off. And so I think that's why right now they're comparatively insulated.